Everton come into this having, lost their last 3 games, seeking to avoid then a 4th successive Premier League defeat. But there's Jordan Pickford saying, look, everything's good. We've got a real feel-good factor at Everton right now. We've brought in leaders, and that's obvious when you look at someone like Conor Cody, even James Tarkowski, the experience that those two now bring to that back line. Like I say, they've gone in they've had a dip in form, having gone through a 6-game unbeaten run since the end of August to the beginning of October. What have you made of the Everton that we're now seeing that last season was in a scrap, was in a battle to stay up?
Are we doing the sack game again?
Well, do you think is that the situation? I mean, they're not.
Well, I mean, it was quite weird. Last weekend you had Crystal Palace, who were 1 point ahead of Aston Villa, and Patrick Vieira's doing a really good job. 1 point. Okay, so now it's changed because they won in midweek. Yep. Palace and Villa lost. Now it's 4 points. And then you've got Leeds, who we've talked about this morning, who are, Jesse Marsch, and I said he feels like he's in a lot of trouble at Leeds United. They've got a game in hand over Everton and can leapfrog them if they win that. Mm-hmm. It changes literally game by game.
It is. It's a pendulum.
I'm thankful I never did management, because it's absolutely hilarious the way we all sort of get caught up of a couple of games down the road, this and less. They've lost their 3 games. Look at the 3 teams they lost to, Nat. Spurs, Man United, Newcastle. All teams in the top 6, yeah? Mm-hmm. So, yes, not good results over the last few games, but it's sort of reignited their season pretty quickly. He has made a lot of change. You can see there is a sort of blueprint of how he wants to change Everton. You can see that. They certainly miss more as much as any team. Centre forward, they're screaming out for one.
Well, yes, and they tried to sort of address that with Neil Maupay, didn't they? Although he's not. I mean, he has scored for Everton, but he's a very different striker than Dominic Calvert-Lewin, who is getting back into the squad after his injury problems. I'm sort of loath to do this, but I am going to do it. There's obviously always the Steven Gerrard and Frank Lampard comparison. You mentioned there about that you feel as though they're getting a bit of an identity under Frank Lampard. Is that where maybe Steven Gerrard went wrong? Because we didn't really know what Villa were all about, whereas Lampard, it feels not only is we're maybe seeing something on the pitch, but you feel as though he really immersed himself in Everton. The fans have taken to Frank Lampard, even though at times, like we say...
It's been difficult.
Yeah.
Look, probably Lampard would have envied Gerrard's team in many ways and the forwards that he had. Certainly because Calvert-Lewin was injured last year, and Everton didn't really have Rondon. They had Ollie Watkins, who was an England player. They had Danny Ings, who's been a really good goal scorer over the years. Yeah. So there's an envy there. Coutinho's come to the club, who had been a big star at Liverpool and Barcelona, and so he'd probably envied in some ways. But you could see that there's been a direction with Lampard in how he transformed the back line. The back line. Pickford was by far their best player last year. And that's a problem when your goalkeeper's needing to be so good. Now, Gerrard, I don't think had attacked the problems that were necessary to make Villa a far more competitive team. Well, I think Lampard has done that at Everton. Yeah. He knew where the problem areas were, and he started the building blocks. I think you can see that at Everton now.
They're taking on a Crystal Palace side that won in midweek. They came from behind to beat Wolves at Selhurst Park. There were some of the fixtures that they've had this season already that have been tough for Crystal Palace. Starting the season with Arsenal, then Liverpool, Manchester City. They've played already, as well as Chelsea. So they've already taken on 4 of the teams of the so-called Big Six. So looking at their fixtures now until the end of this period before the World Cup, they've got this game against Everton, then it's Southampton, West Ham, Forest in the league as well, with a Newcastle League Cup match. Some favourable-looking fixtures for Crystal Palace that you mentioned there, that prior to that victory over Wolves, they were only just sort of outside the relegation zone on points. But in terms of those fixtures to come, they could be finding that by the time the World Cup comes around, they're in a really, really healthy position.
The Palace?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and they look like a team that can turn a game around. I mean, it's always... Eze's come in and done well. He's a very gifted lad, as we talked to the QPR fan earlier. And then you could add in, if Will Zaha's on his game, he can win a game with his individual brilliance. He's just a player that can do that.
Yeah.
I think they're solid enough. But like I said, last weekend, they were 1 point in front of Villa. You know, and Patrick Vieira's job was, he's doing a great job, and Steven Gerrard's was, they're struggling. They're having a bad time. He could lose his job. And that was the difference. Yes, they had a game in hand, but they were just 1 point in front of Villa.
Yeah.
It just shows you how short-term football is.
Yeah, I think Palace need to learn to sort of take a hold of a game from the off, because their 3 wins this season have all come from them having to come from behind to do it. So, really intriguing game, this one, between Everton and Crystal Palace. It's live on talkSPORT.
It's a draw.
Don't ruin
It's
it
like,
for
but no, it'd be
everyone.
a good draw.
All right, that's the most important thing.
draw.
It's going to be a good draw.